day I watched my daughter get humiliated in front of an entire military ceremony, I never imagined that 30 seconds later, a 4-star general would be kneeling at her feet, tears streaming down his face. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. But let me back up for just a moment, because you need to understand who my daughter Celestine really is before I tell you about the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed. Celestine is 19 years old, standing 5'6", with the kind of natural confidence that comes from surviving something most people couldn't imagine. She has my stubborn streak and her mother's fierce intelligence, but what makes her truly remarkable isn't what you see at first glance. It's what you notice when you look closer. 3 years ago, our family was forever changed by a house fire that left Celestine with burn scars running from her left shoulder, up her neck, and partially across her jawline. They're not subtle scars that you might miss in certain lighting. They're the kind that make strangers stare, make potential employers hesitate, and unfortunately, make some people think they have the right to comment on her worth as a human being. Today, she's wearing her army dress uniform for the first time. The deep blue fabric is crisp and perfect, her brass buttons polished to mirror shine, and her hair pulled back in the regulation style that somehow makes her look both younger and more mature at the same time. She earned the right to wear that uniform through sheer determination, graduating basic training with honors despite having to prove herself every single day. Standing next to her is my son Thaddeus, her 16-year-old brother who appointed himself as her unofficial bodyguard the day she came home from the hospital. He's got that protective older brother energy that makes him scan every room for potential threats to his sister, even though she's technically the older sibling. Today, he's wearing his best suit, the one we bought him for his junior prom, because he insisted on looking military appropriate for his sister's big day. My wife Delphine couldn't be here today. She's in the middle of her second round of chemotherapy treatments, but before I left this morning, she grabbed my hands and made me promise to record every second of the ceremony. She said she needed to see our daughter's face when she received her deployment orders, needed to witness the moment when all of Celestine's hard work finally paid off. I'm standing at Fort Braxton, the same base where I served for 12 years before retiring as a sergeant. The familiar sounds and smells bring back a flood of memories, but today isn't about my military service. Today is about watching my daughter follow her own path, one that's been harder fought than mine ever was. What you need to understand about Celestine is that she didn't just decide to join the Army despite her scars. She decided to join the Army because of them. Because on the night she got those scars, she learned something about herself that most 19-year-olds never discover. She learned that when people are in danger, when seconds matter, when everyone else is frozen with fear, she's the person who runs toward the danger instead of away from it. But right now, as I watch her standing in formation with dozens of other new soldiers, I can see that familiar tension in her shoulders. It's the same posture she adopted in high school when kids would whisper behind her back. The same defensive stance she takes when strangers stare too long at restaurants or in grocery stores. Because even though she's proven herself 100 times over, even though she's earned her place here through merit and determination, some people still see her scars first and her character second. And today, unfortunately, some of those people are standing right behind us, about to learn a lesson they'll never forget. As we take our seats in the ceremony hall, I can't help but feel the weight of this moment. This is the same auditorium where I received my own orders 23 years ago, back when I was young and invincible and thought I knew what courage looked like. The walls are lined with portraits of distinguished service members, their eyes seeming to watch over today's ceremony with approval. Celestine sits perfectly straight in her chair, hands folded in her lap, but I know her well enough to recognize the subtle signs of nervousness. She's doing that thing where she traces small circles with her thumb against her index finger, a habit she developed during physical therapy after the fire. It's barely noticeable unless you're looking for it, but it tells me she's processing a lot of emotions right now. The journey to get here hasn't been easy. After the fire, Celestine spent 4 months in the hospital and another 8 months in intensive physical therapy. The doctors warned us about potential limitations, about how scar tissue might affect her range of motion, about psychological trauma that could impact her confidence. What they didn't account for was my daughter's sheer determination to prove them wrong. I remember the day she announced she wanted to join the military. Delphine and I were sitting at the kitchen table going through medical bills when Celestine walked in, still wearing the compression garments she had to wear for 18 hours a day. She didn't ask permission or ease into the conversation. She simply said, "Dad, I want to serve my country. I want to join the army." My first instinct was to protect her, to list all the reasons why military life might be too demanding given what she'd been through. But before I could speak, she continued. The night of the fire taught me something about myself. When everyone else was standing on the sidewalk watching the Hendersons' house burn, I was the one who acted. That's who I am, Dad. That's who I've always been. She was right, of course. Even as a little girl, Celestine was the kid who rescued injured birds, who stood up to playground bullies, who couldn't walk past someone who needed help. The fire didn't create that instinct in her. It just revealed what was already there. The application process was grueling. Military entrance requirements don't make exceptions for good intentions, and Celestine had to undergo additional medical evaluations because of her scars. I watched her train for the physical fitness tests, pushing herself harder than any 18-year-old should have to. She'd wake up at 5 in the morning to run, not because she enjoyed it, but because she refused to let her limitations define her capabilities. Basic training was another challenge entirely. While other recruits worried about drill sergeants and physical demands, Celestine faced the added burden of constant stares and whispered comments. She called home every weekend, and I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, not from the training, but from having to prove herself worthy of respect every single day. But she never complained, never asked to come home. Instead, she threw herself into her studies with the same intensity she brought to everything else. Her commanding officers started using her as an example of dedication and perseverance. Beyond graduation, she'd earned academic honors and the respect of her fellow soldiers, or at least most of them. Thaddeus leans over and whispers, "She looks pretty amazing in that uniform, doesn't she?" His pride is infectious, and I find myself grinning despite my nerves. He's been Celestine's biggest cheerleader through this entire process. Never once suggesting she choose an easier path. The ceremony hall is filling up with families, and I recognize the mixture of pride and anxiety on every parent's face. We're all here watching our children take their first official steps into military service, into a life that will demand everything they have to give. But looking at Celestine now, seeing how she carries herself with quiet confidence despite everything she's endured, I know she's ready for this. The question isn't whether she's strong enough for military service. The question is whether the military is ready for someone like her, someone who's already proven that true strength isn't about avoiding scars, but about what you do after you've earned them. The lights dim slightly, and I hear the rustle of programs, as everyone prepares for the ceremony to begin. In a few minutes, Celestine will officially become a soldier. But sitting here in this moment, I realize she's been a warrior all along. The ceremony is set to begin in 15 minutes when I first hear the whispers. At first I think I'm imagining things, that my protective father instincts are making me hypersensitive to every glance in Celestine's direction. But then the voices become unmistakably clear, and my blood starts to boil. 3 rows behind us, a group of young recruits are having what they clearly think is a private conversation. The loudest one, a stocky kid with a buzz cut who can't be older than 20, nudges his buddy and says, "Dude, check out Scarface over there in the front row." How the hell did she make it through basic? His friend, a lanky redhead with nervous energy, glances toward Celestine and responds, "Maybe they have lower standards for people with disabilities now, like affirmative action but for burn victims." The third guy in their group, who looks like he just graduated high school last week, joins in with a cruel laugh. "I wouldn't want her watching my 6 in combat. What if she freezes up under pressure? People with trauma like that usually crack when things get real." I feel Thaddeus tense beside me, his hands clenching into fists. At 16, he's already taller than me and has inherited his mother's fierce protective streak. I put a restraining hand on his arm, knowing that starting a fight here would only make things worse for Celestine. But the comments don't stop. The buzzcut kid continues, apparently emboldened by his friend's laughter. Seriously though, imagine being stuck in a foxhole with that. The enemy wouldn't know whether to shoot or run away screaming. That's when other people start to notice the conversation. A few families turn to look, some with disapproval at the recruit's behavior, others, unfortunately, craning their necks to get a better look at Celestine. I watch my daughter's shoulders stiffen almost imperceptibly, and I know she's hearing every word. The situation escalates when one of the recruit's mothers decides to get involved. She's a well-dressed woman in her 50s wearing pearls and a navy blazer, clearly someone who's used to speaking her mind in social situations. She approaches our row with what I'm sure she thinks is a kind expression. "Excuse me," she says, tapping my shoulder. "I couldn't help but notice your daughter." She gestures vaguely toward Celestine. "I just wanted to say how brave you all are for encouraging her to pursue this path despite her obvious challenges." Before I can respond, she continues, her voice carrying far enough that nearby families can hear every word. "Have you looked into reconstructive surgery? I know some wonderful plastic surgeons in Atlanta who specialize in burn cases. With the right doctor, she could look almost normal again." The woman's tone is sickeningly sweet, as if she's offering to help us solve a problem we clearly haven't been smart enough to address ourselves. "I mean, she's got such pretty features underneath all that damage. It seems like such a shame to let those scars define her whole life." Thaddeus starts to stand, but I grab his arm more firmly. This isn't his fight to have, and causing a scene won't help Celestine, but I can see the effect these comments are having on her. Her breathing has changed slightly, becoming more controlled, more deliberate. It's the same pattern I noticed during her panic attacks in the months after the fire. The buzz-cut recruit's voice cuts through the air again, apparently unaware that his volume has increased. "I heard burn victims have major psychological issues too. PTSD from their accidents. What if she has a breakdown during deployment? Could get people killed." His friend nods sagely, as if he's an expert on trauma psychology. "Yeah, and think about unit morale. Nobody wants to shower or bunk with someone who looks like that. It's just uncomfortable for everyone involved." The cruel laughter that follows their comments creates a bubble of tension around our entire section. I notice other families looking uncomfortable, some shooting sympathetic glances our way, others clearly unsure how to react to the unfolding situation. That's when I see something that breaks my heart. Celestine's hands, which had been perfectly still in her lap, begin to tremble slightly. It's subtle, almost unnoticeable, but I recognize it immediately. It's the same tremor she developed right after the fire, during those dark weeks when she was convinced she'd never be normal again. For 3 years, I've watched my daughter fight to reclaim her confidence, to build a life where her scars were just part of her story instead of the whole narrative. And now, on what should be one of the proudest days of her life, a group of ignorant kids and their equally ignorant parents are threatening to undo all that progress with their thoughtless cruelty. Watching my daughter's hands tremble, something inside me snaps into focus. Not anger, not the urge to confront the ignorant recruits behind us, but something much more powerful. I realize that this moment isn't about protecting Celestine from cruel comments. It's about giving her the opportunity to show these people who she really is. I stand up and move to the empty seat beside her, leaning in close enough that only she can hear me. "Sweetheart, do you remember what you told me the day you decided to enlist?" She turns to look at me, confusion flickering in her eyes. "Which part?" "You said the night of the fire taught you something about yourself. You said you learned that when everyone else was standing on the sidewalk watching, you were the one who acted." I keep my voice low but steady. "Well, right now, everyone behind us is standing on the sidewalk making assumptions about who you are based on what they see, but they don't know your story." Celestine's trembling stops, and I watch understanding dawn across her face. She's always been private about the details of the fire, even with extended family. The official reports mentioned a house fire and civilian rescue, but she's never talked publicly about what actually happened that night. "Dad, I don't think this is the right time or place," she whispers, glancing around at the formal ceremony setting. "Maybe not," I reply, "but sometimes the right moment chooses us instead of the other way around." Thaddeus leans forward from his seat, having caught pieces of our conversation. "Cel, you don't owe these people anything. But if you want to set the record straight, I've got your back." Before she can respond, the ceremony officially begins. General Morrison takes the podium, his presence commanding immediate silence from the entire auditorium. He's exactly what you'd expect a four-star general to look like: silver-haired, ramrod-straight posture, and the kind of quiet authority that makes everyone pay attention without him raising his voice. "Today we honor a new generation of soldiers," he begins, his voice carrying easily through the sound system. "Each person here has earned the right to wear the uniform through dedication, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to serve something greater than themselves." As he speaks, I notice Celestine's posture changing. Her shoulders square, her chin lifts slightly, and that familiar look of determination settles across her features. It's the same expression she wore when she announced her decision to enlist, the same look she had when she pushed through those grueling months of training. General Morrison continues with the ceremony protocol, but then he deviates from the standard script. This year's class includes several individuals who have demonstrated exceptional academic achievement during their training. I'd like to call forward those soldiers who graduated with honors. He begins reading names, and when he reaches Private Celestine Rodriguez, the applause is polite but routine. As she stands and begins walking toward the stage, I hear one last whispered comment from behind us. Wonder if she got special treatment because of the sob story. That's when Celestine does something that surprises everyone, including me. Instead of walking directly to the stage like the other honored soldiers, she stops in the center aisle and turns to face the audience. The entire auditorium falls silent, unsure what's happening. "General Morrison, sir," she says, her voice carrying clearly without the microphone. "Before I accept this recognition, I believe some people here should understand how I earned these scars." A ripple of whispers spreads through the crowd, but General Morrison raises his hand for silence. His eyes are fixed on Celestine with what looks like genuine curiosity rather than annoyance at the protocol breach. "The floor is yours, Private Rodriguez," he says simply. I watch as Celestine takes a deep breath, her military training evident in her perfect posture and clear voice projection. She's made her choice, and there's no going back now. Behind us, the recruits who were mocking her just minutes ago have gone completely silent, suddenly aware that everyone in the auditorium can see exactly who was talking. 3 years ago, I wasn't planning to be a soldier. Celestine begins, her voice steady and strong. I was just a 16-year-old girl who heard a baby crying in a burning house and knew that waiting for someone else to act wasn't an option. The transformation in the room is immediate and palpable. Every person in that auditorium understands that they're about to hear something significant, something that will redefine everything they thought they knew about the young woman standing before them. Standing in the center of that auditorium, Celestine's voice carries with absolute clarity as she continues her story. The Hendersons lived 2 houses down from us. Mr. Henderson worked nights at the factory. Mrs. Henderson was a nurse at the Children's Hospital. And they had 3-month-old Connor, who had just started sleeping through the night. The audience is completely silent now, hanging on every word. I can see General Morrison leaning forward slightly, his full attention focused on my daughter. At 2:17 a.m. I woke up to screaming, not alarm screaming, but human screaming, the kind that makes your blood run cold because you know someone is in real danger. Celestine's voice remains steady, but I can hear the emotion underneath. I looked out my bedroom window and saw flames coming through the Hendersons' roof. The entire second floor was already engulfed. She pauses for just a moment, not for dramatic effect, but because even now, 3 years later, the memory still hits her hard. I ran to my parents' room and yelled for them to call 911. Then I grabbed Thaddeus from his room. The fire department was 7 minutes away, and from the sound of that baby crying, we didn't have 7 minutes. Behind us, the recruits who had been mocking her earlier are now completely silent. The woman who suggested plastic surgery is staring with her mouth slightly open. Thaddeus and I didn't discuss it, didn't make a plan. We just ran toward that house because that's what you do when people need help. We broke down the front door together. The smoke was so thick I could barely see, but I could hear baby Connor screaming from somewhere upstairs and Mrs. Henderson calling for help from the back bedroom. General Morrison has moved from behind the podium now, standing at attention, as he listens to every word. I sent Thaddeus to get the grandmother who was trapped in the first-floor bedroom while I went upstairs for the baby. The stairs were completely on fire, but Connor's cries were getting weaker, and I knew he was running out of time. Celestine's voice gets stronger as she continues, as if telling the story is giving her power rather than draining it. I wrapped my jacket around my arm and pushed through the flames. I found Connor in his crib, barely conscious from smoke inhalation, but alive. I got him out the window to neighbors who had gathered outside, then went back in for Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. The auditorium is so quiet I can hear the ventilation system humming. That's when the ceiling beam fell. It was massive, probably 8 inches thick, and it came down right across my left shoulder and neck, pinning me against the hallway floor. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, but what scared me most was that I could hear Mrs. Henderson calling for help and I couldn't get to her. I watched as several people in the audience wiped their eyes, completely absorbed in her story. I was trapped for almost 3 minutes before Thaddeus, 2 neighbors, and Mr. Henderson managed to lift that beam off me. By then, the fire had burned through my jacket and into my skin. But every single person in that house walked out alive that night. When she finishes speaking, the silence stretches for what feels like an eternity. Then General Morrison does something I've never seen in my 23 years of military experience. He removes his cap, walks directly to where Celestine is standing, and gets down on one knee in front of her. His voice, when he speaks, is thick with emotion. Private Rodriguez, I have served in 3 combat zones and witnessed acts of extraordinary courage under fire. But what you did that night, at 16 years old, with no training and no backup, represents the purest form of heroism I have ever encountered. He looks up at her with genuine reverence. Those scars you carry aren't marks of tragedy. They're proof of the kind of person who runs toward danger when others run away. They're evidence of a hero. The entire auditorium erupts in applause, but it's not polite ceremony clapping. It's the kind of thunderous, emotional ovation that comes from witnessing something truly extraordinary. People are standing, crying, clapping until their hands hurt. And in that moment, I watch my daughter transform from someone who carried her scars with quiet shame into someone who wears them as badges of honor. The applause continues for nearly 2 full minutes, but what strikes me most isn't the volume. It's the quality of the emotion in that room. This isn't polite ceremony appreciation. This is the sound of people who have just witnessed something that fundamentally changed how they see the world. General Morrison remains on one knee until the applause dies down, then rises and addresses the entire auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just heard is exactly why we serve. Private Rodriguez embodies the warrior spirit that makes our military the finest fighting force in the world, not despite her scars, but because of the character that earned them. He turns back to Celestine, his voice carrying across the now silent room. Private Rodriguez, I am personally recommending you for inclusion in the Army's Exceptional Service Recognition Program. Your story will be shared with future classes of soldiers as an example of true courage and selfless service. As the ceremony continues and other awards are presented, I notice the dramatic shift in how people are looking at Celestine. The same families who were staring with curiosity or pity earlier are now approaching during the reception with genuine respect and admiration. Parents are pointing her out to their own children, not as someone to whisper about, but as someone to admire. But the most powerful moment comes when the buzz-cut recruit who started the cruel comments approaches us during the reception. His face is red with embarrassment and he can barely make eye contact as he walks up to Celestine. "Ma'am," he says, his voice shaking slightly, "I owe you the biggest apology of my life. What I said earlier was inexcusable, and I'm ashamed of myself." He takes a deep breath. "I've never met a real hero before today. Thank you for showing me what one actually looks like." His 2 friends follow behind him, equally humbled. The redhead who made the disability comment actually has tears in his eyes as he shakes Celestine's hand. "I don't know if you can forgive us," he says, "but I want you to know that you've changed how I'll see service forever." Even more surprising is what happens with the woman who suggested plastic surgery. She approaches our family with her own son, the recruit she'd been so proud of earlier. Her demeanor is completely different now, respectful and genuinely apologetic. "I need to apologize to your entire family," she says, looking directly at me and then at Celestine. "My comments were ignorant and hurtful, and they came from a place of not understanding what real beauty and strength look like." She turns to her son. "I hope you learned something important today about judging people by their appearance instead of their character." As we drive home that evening, Celestine stares out the window for a long time before speaking. "Dad, I've spent 3 years avoiding mirrors, avoiding photos, trying to hide parts of myself from the world. But standing up there today, telling that story, I felt something I haven't felt since before the fire." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Proud. Not proud despite my scars, but proud because of what they represent. For the first time since the accident, I looked in a mirror today and saw a hero instead of a victim." When we arrive home, Delphine is waiting, despite her exhaustion from treatment. She set up the laptop to video call with her sister, wanting to hear every detail of the ceremony. As Celestine recounts the day's events, I watch my wife's face light up with the kind of fierce maternal pride that could power entire cities. "I have never been more proud to be your mother," Delphine whispers, holding Celestine close. "You didn't just earn respect today. You taught an entire room of people what courage really means." 6 months later, I receive a package from Celestine's deployment in Germany. Inside is a photo of her with her unit, 12 soldiers who clearly adore and respect their teammate. She's laughing at something off camera, completely comfortable and confident in her own skin. The note attached reads, "Dad, you were right about the mirror, but it turns out my scars aren't just my story of survival. They're my superpower. My unit calls me hero now, not because of what happened to me, but because of who I became because of it. Thanks for teaching me that our worst moments can become our greatest strengths." At the bottom, there's a postscript that makes me smile. "P.S. 2 of those recruits from the ceremony requested transfer to my unit. They said they wanted to learn what real courage looked like." Turns out, sometimes the best teachers are the ones who wear their lessons on their skin,